All right, let's dive right in. We're about to tackle one of the biggest, most fascinating questions out there. Can we actually slow down aging? And you know what? The answer might be way simpler than you think. I mean, forget all the sci-fi stuff, the futuristic tech. The single most powerful tool for a longer, healthier life might be what you choose not to eat. Yeah, we're talking about caloric restriction. It sounds almost too easy, doesn't it? I mean, in a world full of complex biohacking and a million different supplements, could the most powerful anti-aging strategy really be just eating less food? Look, this isn't just some fringe theory. This is a bombshell result that has absolutely rocked research labs for decades. One of the very first studies dropped a number that is still just staggering today. Rats that were fed intermittently lived up to 80% longer. Let that sink in. 80%. That's not a tiny little improvement. That is a fundamental rewrite of the aging process. And believe me, that kicked off a scientific gold rush to figure out how.
So what exactly is caloric restriction? Let's break down the core idea, because while it sounds simple on the surface, the science of why it works, well, that's where things get really revolutionary.
Now, that little phrase, without malnutrition, that is absolutely crucial. This is not about starving yourself or withering away, not at all. It's about sending a very specific biological signal to every single cell in your body, basically telling it to shift gears from grow, grow, grow to protect, repair, and survive.
So, to figure out if this was just a weird fluke with rats, scientists had to go back to the very basics. They started with some of the simplest forms of life on the planet to see if this incredible effect was like a universal law of biology. First up, good old single-celled yeast. Yep, the exact same stuff we use to make beer and bread. When scientists cut back on its main food source, sugar, these tiny little organisms didn't just hang on. They actually thrived, living dramatically longer. That was the very first big clue. Okay, so what about something a little more complex? Let's move up the ladder just a tiny bit, to microscopic worms. You feed them less, and what happens? Boom! The exact same thing. A longer, more robust life. You can see a pattern starting to form here, right? And the pattern just keeps going. You see it again in fruit flies. Restrict their diet, and you slam the brakes on their aging process. So let's recap. In yeast, in worms, and in flies. 3 totally different branches of life. Biology is basically screaming the same message at us. Less food equals more life. And this is where it gets completely wild. This survival response is so deeply wired into their biology that for flies and worms, you don't even have to feed them for this to happen. Just the smell of food is enough to partially cancel out the anti-aging benefits. I'm sorry, what? Just smelling it? That's just nuts. It shows you how these ancient survival circuits are always on, always listening, and they are incredibly sensitive. Okay, so it clearly works wonders in simple little creatures. But that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Does this amazing effect hold up as we climb the evolutionary ladder to animals that start to look a whole lot more like us? Well, when it comes to mice and rats, the answer is a huge, undeniable yes. When you compare mice who have an all-you-can-eat buffet, what scientists call an ad libitum diet, to the ones on a calorie-restricted diet, the results are just stunning. We're talking about a 35 to 65% increase in their maximum lifespan. That is huge.
Okay, so mice and rats are one thing. But what about our closest relatives? What happens when you run these same experiments on primates? This is where the research gets really interesting for us humans.
In the landmark studies on rhesus monkeys, they were a game changer. They showed that, yes, caloric restriction dramatically extends health span. We're talking significantly reduced cancer rates, way lower cardiovascular disease, protection against diabetes, even less brain and muscle loss as they got older. The monkeys on the restricted diet just looked and acted younger, period.
But this is where science gets really interesting and kind of messy. When it came to lifespan, so just the maximum number of years lived, 2 major long-term studies on these monkeys actually had slightly different results, and that difference is really, really important.
Okay, so check this out. You had the University of Wisconsin study, which found a big extension of both lifespan and health span. Then you had the National Institute on Aging study, which saw all those amazing health benefits, but not a statistically significant bump in total lifespan. So what gives? Well, one of the key theories is that the control monkeys in that second study, they were already healthier and leaner to begin with. But here's the key takeaway from both. The improvement in health was undeniable.
I know, this all sounds like a miracle cure. So why aren't doctors just telling everyone to cut their calories by a third? Well, because this is the point in the story where things get complicated. It turns out we aren't just big talking mice. And that's really the key. Most lab animals are biologically built for short, live fast, die young kinds of lives. So their bodies are incredibly responsive to these hunger signals. But humans? We're already the outliers in the longevity game. We are one of the longest-lived mammals on the entire planet, which means our biology just isn't as flexible.
So what's actually going on here? What's the secret sauce? How does eating less trigger this incredible repair response inside our bodies? Well, scientists discovered it all comes down to flipping a single, ancient biological switch.
And that switch is a pathway called mTOR. The easiest way to think about it is like the head foreman of your body's cellular construction site. Its entire job is to constantly check on the supply chain and make a call. Do we have enough resources coming in to build new stuff right now? Or is it time to shut down construction and focus on repairs and maintenance?
Exactly. So when you eat, especially protein, mTOR gets the signal and it flips to the on position. It yells out to all your cells, it's go time, green light, let's grow, divide, and build. But when you fast or you restrict calories, mTOR flips off. And that is the magic moment. The cell's entire priority shifts from growth to survival and repair. It kicks on these powerful cellular housekeeping processes like autophagy, where the cell literally cleans itself out, recycling old, damaged parts to become stronger and more resilient. It's like a deep clean for your cells. Okay, so after looking at all this evidence from yeast to monkeys to the deep biology inside our cells, what does it all really mean for us, for humans? Well, while adding another 30 years to our lives might not be realistic, the science is pointing to a far more achievable, and you could argue, a much more important prize, a longer health span. And the proof is right there in human trials. People who practice some form of caloric restriction see these incredible health improvements across the board. We're talking lower risk for heart disease, way better insulin sensitivity to protect against diabetes, lower blood pressure, and less of that nasty oxidative stress that basically rusts our cells from the inside out. You know, this reveals something so critical. The goal isn't to starve ourselves, not at all. It's about recognizing that our bodies evolve for times of scarcity, but we now live in a world of constant 24/7 abundance. And that means for a lot of us, that mTOR growth switch is basically stuck in the on position all the time, never giving our bodies the quiet downtime they need to run those crucial repair and maintenance programs. And that leads us to the real bottom line, the ultimate conclusion for us long-lived humans. The most powerful lever we can pull isn't some extreme 30% calorie-slashing diet. It's simply using these biological principles to avoid obesity and maintain a healthy body weight. For us, that is the single most effective way to capture all the amazing health-boosting benefits that we've seen in all those decades of research.
Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't just about adding more years to your life, it's about adding more life to your years. So the real question is, what will you do to invest in your health span? Thanks for watching this explainer.